In the spring of 1970, this quiet corner of Ontario became the hunting ground for a serial killer. 34-year-old Doreen Morby was raped and shot to death in her own home. 2 weeks later, the same fate befell 38-year-old Helen Ferguson. .22 caliber slugs are pulled from both victims and matched to the barrel of a single gun. Semen collected at each crime scene reveals the killer's blood type, but little else. Police hunt the culprit for months to no avail. For 25 years, the case is colder than a Canadian winter. Then one day, detectives stumble across a new lead, one that begins with the story of a stick-up man. Sault Ste. Marie, a remote mill town in the far reaches of northern Ontario. A community that rarely sees crime outside of the occasional bar fight or domestic dispute. But in the summer of 1995, police are grappling with a robbery spree.
It began in June of 1995 with a robbery in a private residence. Shortly after that, there was a robbery that we became aware of at a boutique. Then there was a robbery at a fur and jewelry store that took place beside the courthouse here in Sault Ste. Marie.
Detectives from 3 agencies joined forces to track the second-story man. Their best shot hit the local pawn shops looking for stolen goods.
I got a call the following day from one of our detectives in Sudbury, and that an individual a week prior did attend this particular pawn shop and pawned off a ring that was similar in description to a ring that was taken from the robbery in Sault Ste. Marie.
According to the records of a pawn shop in Sudbury, Ontario, the man who pawned the ring presented a valid driver's license under the name Ronald Glenn West. When Pellerin runs a background check on West, he finds the tale of a Toronto cop gone bad. Retired from the force in 1972, Ron West has a long string of arrests for theft, battery, and drug possession.
And we did surveillance on the house. There's 2 vehicles in a driveway that matched the description of the vehicle that left the armed robbery in Iron Bridge.
Detectives obtain a search warrant for West's home. Inside it, they find a stash of stolen jewels. Ronald Glenn West is arrested, convicted on 5 counts of armed robbery, and sentenced to a 10-year stretch behind the walls of Kingston Penitentiary. As his life unraveled, so too do the secrets of his past. Shortly after his armed robbery conviction, Ron West's home is sold, and the new owners begin renovations. As they dig into the old walls, the construction crew unwittingly digs up the clue to a cold case of murder.
And while they're renovating the basement, the owner had pulled back some ceiling boards, and an envelope was concealed behind these boards. Inside the envelope contained these 2 firearm permits with Ron West's name on it from 1969 and 1970.
Aware of Ron West's criminal history, the new homeowners passed the permit along to Ed Pellerin, who was left scratching his head at the curious artifact. That is, until he happens to share it with a colleague named Don McNeil. The same Don McNeil who worked the original Morby-Ferguson murder investigation back in 1970. In the fine print of Ron West's old gun permit, Detective McNeil sees something that this cold case hasn't seen in 27 years, a connection.
It was for a 9-shot, .22 caliber pistol. The weapon believed to be used in the 1970 murders was believed to be a 9-shot, .22 caliber pistol.
In 1995, Ron West called this holding cell home as he awaited trial on 5 charges of jewel theft. To while away the time, West wrote letters, including one to his wife in Toronto.
She didn't want to have anything to do with him, but especially after the embarrassment of him being arrested for the armed robberies and the home invasions.
He had sent her a letter, and she kept it for a while, and then she called us and advised us that she had the letter She was throwing it out and wanted to know if we were interested in it.
Cold case detectives took possession of the letter, read it, and then reconciled it to a police file. In 1998, Ed Pellerin pulls out the letter and wonders if it might not be the key to solving his case.
I'd sent it to the Centre for Forensic Science in Toronto and requested an examination of the stamp to see if there was any DNA present and if a profile could be obtained.
Pamela Newell is a DNA specialist at the Center of Forensic Sciences. In September of 1998, she receives Ron West's letter and begins to work. She is hoping to extract DNA material from human cells trapped in the glue when West licked the envelope and stamp. Her efforts yield only a partial DNA profile, which is then compared against the killer's genetic signature.
The person who had licked the postage stamp may well have been the person who raped both of these women. The frequency of occurrence might have been perhaps 1 in 1,000 for this combined profile, which would mean that if you had 10,000 men in any one area, that any 10 of them could have contributed this particular sample.
1 in 1,000. Not good enough odds to link Ron West to the double homicide, but more than enough to secure a warrant from a judge.
After we got the results of the DNA from the stamp, that gave us sufficient grounds to obtain a judicial warrant and to obtain blood.
On March 26, 1999, Ron West submits to a court order and rolls up his sleeve. A needle finds a vein, and the stuff of life races into the vacuum of a syringe. This time, DNA testing will leave no doubt. The likelihood of Ronald Glenn West's innocence is whittled to a mathematical impossibility.
The numbers for one of the deceased women were in excess of 1 in 6 billion, the population of the world. So that's very, very conclusive DNA evidence.
31 years after the fact, Ron West pleads guilty to 2 counts of murder. West's gun permit found hidden inside a wall proves to be the killer's downfall.
I never dreamt that there'd ever be an arrest. I didn't even really think about it anymore.
Dale Ferguson was 8 years old, homesick from school when his mother was raped and shot to death just a few feet from Dale's bedroom. He has lived his life with a memory where his mother should have been.
All those other years when it was kind of a factor in our lives, it was always just, I had my mother stolen from me. Then when I went back and I thought about, well, this guy held a gun to my mother's head, made her have sex with him, and then killed her. And what was that like for her? Which, I never thought about that for 30 years.
Friends and families of the victims will now begin anew the task of coping with the past and hoping for a brighter future. As for Ronald West, his future is right here, behind the walls of a Canadian prison, where he will spend the remaining years of his life.